Hey everybody, welcome to Greg's Garage Pod with co-host Jason Pridmore. I'm Greg White, and this is our special MotoAmerica podcast. So yeah, everybody who was complaining last week that it was just me, welcome back to the podcast, Jason Pridmore. Hey JP.
What's up, G-Dub? Thanks for holding down the fort last week. Appreciate that very much. And no, good to be back on. Can't believe, man, Greg, really? Round 9. Just seems like yesterday we were rolling into Atlanta with thoughts of what was going to happen, and now we're at round 9.
Round 9 with talks of round 8 and what happened. And let's first start off with Caroline Olsen. What's going on with her? I know she had a big high side and got hurt and all that.
It was a drag. Obviously, that's why I wasn't with you last week. So, you and I did try to do the podcast last week, but me not knowing I was going to be in Pittsburgh for an extra week, essentially, I didn't bring all the stuff that it takes to do this podcast, even though we did give it a go. No, she's good. She flew home by medical plane Saturday morning. There was a lot of things. It was changing hour to hour when she was going to get to go home or how she was going to go home, if she was going to stay here or go over there. And if you looked at the crash, it's so crazy because from Roger Hayden, Melissa Paris, and I know Bryce Prince, Hayden Gillum reached out as well. A lot of these guys couldn't even understand what she did. If you look at the accident, it didn't even look like much, but I just guess it was the way she landed, and she ended up breaking her pelvis and her sacrum. And so she had external fixator thrown on, and she's in great spirits. She's doing great. Like, I think, to be fair, this will be a really, I don't want to say easy injury to come back from, but she's going to breeze it because she had a tremendous surgeon in Pittsburgh, and she's home resting. And she's going to a very high-end, apparently, rehab facility in a week's time. She'll be there getting rehabbed and all that kind of stuff. So she's doing good.
Good. And no word on what she's going to do next year, obviously. I think she talked about that on social media, but hopefully we'll see her back in the paddock next year. She is a fan favorite.
Yeah, right? No, she's I don't think that, with Caroline, she's just had 3 little weird incidents, and this one is another one. Is an outlap and hadn't ever ridden on that medium tire really. And I think it just the flick from the left to right. Even Bryce and a couple other guys said that she wasn't even in the corner hardly yet, and the thing was already flinging her. And just kind of maybe went out, maybe a little hard. I don't know. I watched it 3 or 4 times, and it just looks like just one of those strange incidents. But I think that she'll be back next year, and the Norris family, like Kelly and Angie Norris, have been amazing to her. So, she's really happy with her team. So she'll probably be back next year, I would assume.
All right. Well, that's good. Okay, so should we just dive right into EBC Brakes Superbike class here and what we saw last week? I guess it's been almost 2 weeks now, right? Or a week and a half or something.
A week and a half, yeah.
Do you remember much about the races?
It was a weird weekend for me from the time I got on the airplane and then woke up in the middle of the night realizing, I knew my bag felt a little bit light when I was leaving. And in the middle of the night before Friday practice, I realized that I'd forgotten all my MotoAmerica, TV shirts. So thank you to Robbie Floyd for bailing me out. And from that point on, it was just a weird weekend. But I think that the thing I'll take away from Superbike when we start talking about it, Greg, right off the bat, it's just the frustration for Cameron Beaubier. He's really been in the mix to have won, I'm going to say 3 of the last 4, 4 out of the last 5. Legitimately, I think at Laguna Seca, he just couldn't get through Tony, and Garrett ran off and rode superb there. A little bit of the same at Sonoma. He crashes early in a race that I think he would have contended for the win in the first leg. Comes back and wins the second. And then we go to Pittsburgh and doesn't win either race there, finishing second both times, and arguably was probably, taking nothing away from the other 2, but probably the fastest guy, for the majority of the weekend, and doesn't come out of there with either wins. And I think that's the difference in the championship. These last 5 races we've had, Cameron's only won 1 of them. And I think he had the potential to win all 5, but it just didn't work out.
Yeah, it's been really weird watching his luck. And he and I have had this conversation, how he seemed to have this kind of rhythm where, and I hate to say it's a rhythm, but the beginning of seasons, he would struggle. And then it was like right after the 3rd round, they would start to pick up momentum and things would start to go his way. That's how he won the championship last year. He just started a dominating streak and ripped it. But this year, it just seems like they've been on their back foot because they had a good, strong start to the season, which was not usual. He wins the first race of the season. He finishes third. And then all of a sudden, it was round 6, I think, the second one at Virginia, where he had no, it wasn't the second one at Virginia. That's where Tony did
that was JD.
Yeah.
JD won the first day, and then
it was the second one. It was the second one at Virginia where Cameron had a DNF. I think it was our 6th round. And then he's been on the podium, but he didn't get a win until our 14th race, which was Sonoma race 2, where you and I had talked like, hey, we think Monterey, Sonoma, Pittsburgh, all going into those races are Cameron Beaubier tracks. But if you look at the points that he actually walked away with, not a tremendous haul like we thought he was going to have. That honor really has gone to Garrett Gerloff, his teammate. So
Garrett's just ridden great. He's come into his own. I think even, Greg, you can make the argument. You go back to the second race at Utah where he was leading by 2.5 seconds when that race was red flagged, and then it all went upside down from there. Tony gets out of there with a double win and goes into Laguna with a lot of momentum. And it literally, now we can go back and call it 5 out of the last 6 actual races where you could have put a good stead of money on Cameron to win. He's only won one of them. So, and then his teammate has gotten, found his legs on the Superbike. And, I think Garrett's just ridden so well all year. He's had pole positions and fastest laps and all those things. So we can't take anything away from him. But even Tony at the end of the second race at Pittsburgh was saying, I wasn't the fastest guy today, but we just managed to figure out a way to win.
Yeah, and that's really what it was. If you look at fastest laps at in race number 2, Tony did a 141.3. Cameron Beaubier was the only one in the 40s. He did a 140.9. I mean, that's 0.4 of a second quicker. Fastest lap to fastest lap, but he just couldn't close the deal. He runs off in the chicane and then makes up all that time. But of course, that best time of the race was done on the last lap of the race as well. And he lost by 0.3 of a second. But just to recap what happened in Pittsburgh, it was Gerloff, Beaubier, Elias, Gagne with the 4th, and Schulte with the 5th. And then you had in race 2, Tony, who wins by 0.3 over Beaubier. Josh Herrin rebounds after his disaster on day 1. And then Jake Lewis in 4th and Schulte. Got to talk about Jake Lewis, Jason, because it's all of a sudden seemed like now the M4 Star Suzuki crew has really started to sort something out for Lewis. And he looked great in race number 2. Finally kind of had like a mistake or drama-free race for him.
Correct. Yeah, and it's just so great. And I think that we can get to that. I want to ask you a question because we'll get back to the Jake Lewis thing because I agree with you 100%. But, when you look at the pace of where MotoAmerica is right now, I cannot look at Cameron ever. I can never really look at Cameron and ever think that pressure or choking or any of that gets away. But the mistake that he makes at Sonoma in the first race, and then the mistake he makes while leading at Pittsburgh, what do you attribute that to? Do you attribute it to the pace? Do you attribute it to being maybe a little frantic? Maybe the Pittsburgh mistake with 3 to go. I can't remember seeing him ever do that, making a mistake like that late in the race. Like he takes the lead, kind of getting away, makes a big mistake in the chicane. And then, the last 2 laps he raced, the last 2 laps were phenomenal to watch. He did fastest lap after fastest lap with 2 to go. But that big mistake in the chicane where he runs off through the grass just cost him too much time, and he wasn't able to get back to the back wheel, really, of Tony to make a challenge.
It's really hard to diagnose with Cameron what's going on, I think, because he's been so solid. But the only thing that I see nowadays is the fact that, what's going to happen with the Monster Energy Yamalup Yamaha factory racing team for 2020. Cameron's got no contract. Garrett Gerloff doesn't have a contract either. The question is that team going to exist, or is Yamaha going to pivot and start to spread money out to other teams, and who's going to have a job and who's not going to have a job? That's kind of the question. And I wonder if maybe Cameron is losing a bit of focus, not so much on the racetrack, because we know he's losing focus on the racetrack, but I wonder if he's distracted off the track, and maybe that's creeping in. Because maybe it is, Jason, that desperation to win this championship that has forced his hand into making some mistakes, because now all of a sudden the future is uncertain. And I know that Cameron is very much a guy who likes more security, than risk in the future. He's very smart with his money. He's made investments as a young man, not only in himself. Remember, I mean, ultimately the reason why Cameron Beaubier is in our paddock is because after he won, Red Bull Rookies Cup stuff, he took that sponsor money that he had, I think it was 50 grand from Red Bull or whatever it was, and came back to the US and started his own R6 program, which ultimately got him a ride on the Graves team. So Cameron's been very smart with his money. He's conservative with it. I don't think that he wants to race until he's 45 years old. And so I think maybe that there's hints of that in the background working, and that kind of forced his hand. It's not so much like, I need to win a Superbike championship again. I need number 4. I think it's, I need to win because what does my future hold? Does any of that make any sense?
Yeah, and look, when you think of Tony as well, we've really only seen Tony make 2 mistakes this year, but they were both big ones. He crashed at Road America, crashes again at Sonoma, because legitimately, if Tony just kind of, I don't know, rolls to the, what did he have, Greg? He had a long par 5 to the finish line at Road America where he crashed.
Yeah.
And if he rolls across there and gathers those points, and then he fell very early, very uncharacteristic mistake to see him do that on lap 2 at Sonoma. The points gap would be much, much bigger. I think too that Cameron now realizes that he's racing his teammate as well as Tony. It's hard to even put a finger on why or how. Maybe some of that stuff that you're talking about off track is affecting him. But, again, Tony's racking up podiums. He ends up 3rd, like we talked about in the first race, wins the second race, came back the second day after making some changes overnight. And when you look at his lap time, Greg, the lap time really, I think he was better the first day, if I'm not mistaken. The second day of the track was a little bit slower. I do remember that, and I'm pulling it up now. So yeah, the first day he went 41.1. Second day he goes 41.3, and just kind of chugged along and collects a bunch of points. And we saw Garrett with a very, uncharacteristic motor problem or bike problem, transmission problem, whatever it was, there in the second race, because if you remember, he took off and then caught a false neutral going up into turn 3, ran off in the grass and barely made it back to the pits with the bike being a little bit sick. So, those 3 guys right now are kind of the class. Talking about Jake Lewis and getting back to that story, how awesome was it just to see him leading a race again?
Oh, so good. I mean, it's just for the mental side of it, just knowing Jake and all that he's been through in the last couple of years on and off the racetrack. His team basically had done like a reorg inside the team, and that have moved some personnel around, or I shouldn't say they moved personnel around, more moved and shifted responsibilities. And to the people involved in all of that, to be able to check their egos and allow that to happen and let data flow the way and information flow the way it is now. All that stuff is great, and hats off to Chris Ulrich making those changes. But when it comes to Jake Lewis, man, it's just, the loss that he's experienced in the last couple of years, not only job-wise, right? We know Tony's there racing on ultimately what was Jake Lewis's motorcycle, but also, family and everything else. It's such a feel-good story, and Jake Lewis is such a good dude, and
he really is.
And he does his thing. He does his own thing. He's part of the Owensboro crew, but he's not, all the time immersed in whatever, the Roger Hayden led crew kind of does. Jake Lewis just gets it on himself. We were talking about that before, where he's like, look, all these guys like to go out and pedal bikes and all that stuff, and that's great, but he goes, I'm a motorcycle racer. If I train, I want to train on a motorcycle. So I want a flat track, I want a moto, I want to do all those things. And so I think
there's nothing wrong with that either.
No,
I mean, that's great.
No,
you got to have your own individuality. If there's some form of training that you don't really enjoy, but you can still get the same benefits from a different type, and that's what's great. And being able to, and I know how handy the guy is on a motocross bike and a dirt tracker. He loves all that stuff, and I agree with him. I think that if you can get yourself on a bike, and I love the fact that, I mean, you did it, I did it, so many guys bicycle, but for some people, going out and putting in 300-400 miles a week or more doesn't interest them as much. They'd rather go do other stuff, which is great. So whatever it is that keeps him energized and ready to go. And we saw him It would have been, what would have been really good is had he been able to finish that race the first day. If you remember, Cameron Beaubier kind of stuffed it up underneath him going into 3. It was a totally clean move, but it just kind of caught Jake off guard, and he stood the bike upright. And while he did that, poor Josh Herron was on the outside of him and kind of got collected. Second time in 2 weekends, those guys have got together. If you remember at Sonoma, Josh went down the inside of Jake and tipped off and took Jake with him. And then at this one, Jake took Josh with him. So I saw some funny posts between the two of them on social media, just how they've kind of found each other on the first laps of races the last 2 weeks. But he didn't get those important laps on the first day, which made the second day, I thought, even more impressive.
Yeah, totally agree. Because that's the way these things are turning out now. Day one race is, Saturday's race are tremendous data gathering. So here we are late in the season, Jay. Let me ask you this question. Do you think...
Yep.
The couple things with Tony Elias that you brought up a moment ago that has been interesting, that Tony is just kind of gathering points. I think that we have, how do I put this, grown accustomed to the Tony Elias that wins now. Now, Tony's at what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 wins this season. 7 wins? 8 wins this season. Does it seem like that to you? Does it seem like that he's nearly won half the races this year?
In a way it does. He's been a tremendous fighter. It just seems to me like this year he has taken advantage. He's been the best at taking advantage of other people's mistakes. I love his interviews afterwards because he's so honest with, I thought at Pittsburgh, he would be so pumped on that second race win. And if you kind of watched him, he was, trust me, when you're winning, you're happy. But the ego part of it is like, I want to be the fastest all the time. And I feel like when I go back and I think about the year, I'm going to go back and I'm going to think about race 2 at Utah, where he was 2.5 seconds back. And it looked like, I don't feel that he would have caught Cameron with 6 laps to go there. I think that the laps were short and 2.5 seconds was a big ask. And I think that Cameron was responding. So I'm going to look at that race number 1, and I'm going to look at this last weekend where there were 2 victories. There was 2 25-point hauls on the table for Cameron that not only would have given him more momentum, but probably would have given him a bit of a boost more in the championship. And Tony walks away from both those races with 25 points in what literally could have been less, He just does a really great job with the package he has underneath it. And we've seen him make 2 mistakes all year. At this point, when you have the caliber that we have up at the front, you've got to minimize mistakes. And he's done really well at that.
So the situation in the championship looks like this. Tony's got a 35-point lead over Cameron Beaubier and 56 over Gerloff. But with the amount of wins that Tony Elias has, if he can get 15 points on Cameron this weekend and have 50 or more, he'll wrap up the championship before we're done, before we head off to Barber. That's with the season that, considering that you have a Cameron Beaubier of his caliber who has not finished off the podium. Oh, he has. He finished 1 time off the podium. But then those 2, non-paying finishes that he's had, DNFs and that type of stuff, where Tony has had nothing but podium finishes with 2 DNFs. But in Tony's, so in 14 races that Tony's actually finished, Jason, he's only scored under 20 points each race, under twice, you know?
And those are the 2 that he fell, right? So
No, meaning I'm saying he DNF, but he's only had 2 races where he's been 3rd place. Everything else
gotcha.
Of the 14. Gotcha. So of the 14 races he's finished, 12 of them he's finished 1 or 2. And that's just
amazing.
And some of those races have come easier, I should say. And some of those races he just fights and does what Tony does best, which is, okay, mid-race, let's see what we got. And then he comes back and then he just starts making moves on people. And I think that the way he's done it too is really impressive, especially at Pittsburgh, when we know the Suzuki is not a roll through the corner like a Yamaha R1 is. It's more of a point and shoot type motorcycle, and Pittsburgh is not a point and shoot type of track. So I just thought what he's doing is really impressive, but I'm not giving him the championship yet. One of the things looking forward was, to this weekend at New Jersey is the forecast looks phenomenal, at least last time I checked. So I thought, okay, if we go to New Jersey, and it seems like, Jason, we have had weather there, for the years, the MotoAmerica years, we've been there at least once, but, like at least one day. And I think, if the skies open up, now we're talking about a different championship, possibly, because
Yep.
Tony might go into conservative mode. He might make a mistake. Cameron might go into I've got to get everything I can mode. There's just so much stuff, I think. But unfortunately, for the championship, as it were, but fortunately for the series, fortunately for Tony, fortunately, everybody wants to race in dry conditions. It doesn't look like Hurricane Dorian or anything is going to make it up the coast.
Nope. Which is good
to affect the race. Yeah, we know that it's down in Florida right now.
Better for the spectators. It's better for everybody. I think that we hopefully get a couple of like really dry days there. And I think really, like you say, Greg, with the 2-day schedule, man, if we had weekend like we've had there, couple 2 out of the last 3 years, I believe it is, where it just poured the whole time. And I think it would make the 2-day schedule a lot harder on the staff and corner workers and everything else. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it's supposed to, earlier in the week, I saw it might rain on Friday and then get better, obviously, for Saturday, Sunday, which is good. So, and Jersey, it lends itself to really good racing. Like, I feel like we always have really, really good racing there. So let's hope that continues.
Yeah, for sure. 78 degrees and sunny on Saturday, 80 degrees and sunny on Sunday. So if you're thinking about it, you got to come and check out New Jersey Motorsports Park for MotoAmerica, because it promises to be good stuff. Now, Jason, since you I don't know, did you get a chance to listen to the podcast last week?
This is going to sound like an excuse, okay? And I get it. But I was going to listen to it tomorrow on the airplane on my way to Jersey.
Okay. Why?
But then again, why do I got to listen to you more than I already have to anyways? But
torture yourself. I didn't listen to it.
I would like to listen to it to hear what Garrett had to say.
Yeah, because Garrett said a lot. And if you didn't get to listen to it last week's, then go check it out, because that was our first time having Garrett Gerloff on the podcast, and he's been on fire. So good conversation with him. But when we were talking, I did ask him to look ahead to New Jersey Motorsports Park.
Yeah, Jersey's fun. It's a little rough. It's been getting kind of a little bit rougher every year, but that's just kind of the characteristic of the track. But it has a really fun flow to it, has some decent grip, and I've had some success there in the past. I'd say that I probably like it more for some of the things that have happened there in the past in my career, and so I kind of have like a sentimental tie to the track. But I also really like the way that it races, and it can be pretty difficult to make passes on, but I'm looking forward to it. And just in general, these last 4 races, like, I'm gonna give it everything I have. I'm so motivated to go out there and try to I'm always trying to do the best that I can, but I'm so motivated to go out there and try to put in some really solid 4 races, and who knows, maybe catch back up in the championship. And you never know, 4 races, that's a bunch of laps, and anything can happen. So I'm just gonna give it all I got.
And of course, Jason, Gerloff, Bobier, Tony Elias, Josh Aaron, those 4 factory rides contracts are up. But I think what was key in what he said is the fact that New Jersey's a little bit bumpy, and I think that's an understatement. It lacks some grip as well. It's old asphalt. Your boy Jeff White, my brother, was there last week or something, and he said that its surface is not the best by any stretch of the imagination.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see. And with those, look, this is what we saw at Sonoma, Jay, just to jump ahead, this is what we saw at Sonoma was the 2-day weekends, the lack of time. If you have a really bumpy racetrack, we saw a big separation. So hopefully it won't be that kind of conditions when we get there. I know that they did some patching. There were some holes in the asphalt, and they've done some patching and stuff like that. So hopefully we'll show up to a good racetrack.
Well, the lap times at Jersey are, I want to think they're 10, 12, 15 seconds faster than at Sonoma. So you get more laps, which is nice. It's a little bit shorter racetrack. You're going to get more laps. You'll get more quality laps, hopefully, which will be good as far as your practice sessions and things go. So, and I know the surface hasn't been good there. I think that the key, though, like you say, Greg, is weather. Weather is going to be key, because if we get a nice, 2 nice dry days of riding, that's going to be the key. because these guys are going to get the quality track time. And when I say that, I'm not talking about just because of the track, but it'll cut down on incidents and things hopefully as well. When it rains, we have a tendency there, especially when it rains, you can get quite a few red flags because bikes can be put in precarious positions and such. So it slows the program down. The quality track time might not be as great, but that's why I was really pushing for a hopefully dry weather. I think it's really cool. Listen to what Garrett has to say there. He's going to go to these final 2 rounds and hang it out as much as he can. Because he feels confident on the bike and obviously he's got a lot of belief in himself. There's no reason why he couldn't pick up another couple wins before the end of the year. I'd have to go back in the record book, Greg, but I believe this was the place that Garrett won his first ever 600 Superstock race. When he had come back from injury, he jumped back down into Superstock, and I believe this is where he won his first national. So when you hear the sentimental ties with this place, I think that that was where he got his first victory as well. Yeah. I believe.
Yeah, you might be right. Also, on the podium last year too, and I was looking at the results from last year, Skoltzy goes well here. Matthew Skoltz on that Westby Racing Yamaha. So we'll see if those guys are able to rebound from. I mean, look, 5th place is 5th place. It's good, but Skoltz.
Yeah, they want to be up front, and they're making some. They're just doing some little tweaks and changes. And Matthew, I think, is working on a few things, and they're close. They're not far off, and it's going to be a matter of putting it together. And then, when you talk about Matthew being there, and then obviously we just talked about Jake Lewis. He's going to be coming off such a high, and I think that it's a really good track for Jake. So it would be nice. JD Beach has been a little bit off the last couple. Well, really, we haven't really seen him close, Greg, since Utah. I mean, Laguna, he was a bit off. I know he had to run 4-5 races that weekend, but we haven't really seen JD that close in the last sort of 5 or 6 races. So it'd be nice to see him have a little bounce back too. He had a tough weekend at the Springfield Mile this weekend. I don't know if you got to watch any of that, but he had a tough weekend there. So it'd be good to see JD get a little bit of luck on his side and get rolling again.
For sure.
When we start talking about Supersport, Greg, I think that when you look back at what Pittsburgh was for us, there's a lot of storylines, obviously the championship and the main contenders that we have there, but it was definitely the coming out party, one that you and I expected. Sean Dillon Kelly, I'm sure if a lot of us would have put money on him doing the double and winning both races, the odds were probably pretty high, but he went ahead and did that, didn't he? I mean, he just rode unbelievable. First day after a red flag where Bobby Fong crashed, our points leader fell. Sean Dillon Kelly picked up for the MFAR X-Star Suzuki team and goes on and wins his first race by 4/10 over PJ Jacobson and Hayden Gillum. And on the second day, in what I think is probably the race of the year, maybe the race of the last 2 years, Sean Dillon Kelly goes in and beats Bobby Fong by 5 thousandths of a second. And PJ ends up third. I just think this young man now is on a path where he is going to be the hardest guy to beat week in and week out. Sean Dillon Kelly is here, and I think those 2 wins were just incredible to watch.
So, yeah, Jay, I think I'm going to take kind of a wait-and-see attitude with Sean Dillon Kelly to see if he starts, on his dominating run, only because, it's been one weekend, and this class is so tight with PJ, Hayden, Gillum, and, of course, Bobby Fong. The question now, though, is with the championship winding down, 100 points left, it's tight. 11 points to Hayden Gillum, 20 points to PJ. Does Sean Dillon Kelly become the fly in the ointment? Were you surprised that SDK raced Bobby Fong to the line knowing what's at stake for Suzuki, the championship, and all that kind of stuff in race number 2, part 2, I guess?
I was. I'm not going to lie. And I think what I tell you that I'm expecting him to, what I'm trying to explain is that he will be there from the start a lot more. In other words, he has experienced what winning pace is now all the way through the end of the finish. So we've seen him go fast all year. We've seen him not make any mistakes, essentially. We've talked about that, the intelligence that he rides with, riding IQ, if you will. I think that what I'm trying to get across is, maybe you put it the best, he will be a fly in the ointment. He is going to be there every race now. He will be up with the leaders at the final 2 rounds. That is, mark my word stuff. You're not going to see him finishing 8 seconds back or 7 seconds back. He'll be in the lead group. He'll be with the front runners unless a mistake is made where he runs off the track or something silly like that we haven't seen. But once you've experienced the pace, that's what I like to call it. Once you've experienced winning and seeing how hard you have to ride to do that, fly in the ointment might be a great way of putting it. I was holding my breath that last corner, last lap, because I knew how hard he was on the front brake going up underneath Bobby. And can you imagine had something horrendous happen there where, maybe they both went down but they raced each other great. They raced each other great to the line. There didn't seem like there was any animosities, at least in public. So that was good.
Did you see Bobby Fong's post? Like he was on a bicycle or something. It was a couple days ago on Instagram. He's like sitting at a table, but he's got a bicycle and his feet up. Did you see that thing?
I did see it. Yes.
I'm like, there's no way he's on a bicycle. That dude is hurting. He's hurting. I know his ankle's hurting. I don't know what the prognosis is because I haven't talked to him, but I know that dude's hurting. If he got on a bicycle, I would be shocked. I think that was more of a post that was kind of like, yeah, I'm out training, trying to psych his competition out. I'm just saying. Now, look, Sean Dillon Kelly's not out of this championship either. I mean, mathematically, he's in. There's 100 points left. He's got 45 points. He's back from his teammate. So he's not out of it. But obviously, Bobby Hayden and PJ, have 3 of those guys make tremendous mistakes over the next couple of races and have SDK like right in the mix. But he's there. And those are the only 4 riders that are mathematically eligible to contend for this championship. But, it seems like to me, Jason, Supersport has been there. It's been a good championship. We've seen, riders fall and get back up. And we've seen PJ start to find pace. And it's been a great story. But to me, I think part 2, race 2, with a margin of victory of 0.005 of a second, that all of a sudden it's like, boom, here's Supersport.
Yeah.
11 points, the difference, and it's front and center for me right now.
Yeah, well, when you look at the results, and I didn't go through them the way I probably should have for the listeners, but, Sean Dillon Kelly, PJ Jacobson, Hayden Gillum, they were our top 3 the first day because of Bobby's gigantic crash. And I had so many people ask me questions about that crash. And I said, listen, that turn is really tricky. Turn 14 at Pittsburgh, I think, is one of our hardest corners. I know you haven't gone through there on a bike, Greg, but it's a weird corner. And when you're riding at that limit, I don't think that there was any kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It was when you're riding that close to the edge, it's a very easy corner to make that mistake in. We haven't seen a lot of people crash there traditionally over the years, but it just caught him out, and it was so big. The fact that the guy could even race on Sunday was crazy. But let's go and look at a couple guys, Greg, that got some really good finishes. We saw Nick McFadden. He ended up 4th. And how about Corey Ventura? Corey Ventura finishes 5th.
Yeah.
On the first day, which is an incredible job from coming from Liqui Moly Junior Cup. He ends at 5th, and he beats Braden Ort. Benjamin Smith, best result of the year for Benjamin. He's had a tough year. He finishes 7th. Lucas Silva, Aguilar, and Richie Escalante, who we know had some issues the first day. That was our top 10. The second day, it was Sean Dillon Kelly again with Bobby Fong and PJ, who we'll talk about in a second, because he has really been the benefactor, hasn't he, Greg, over the last 2 rounds with just gathering a ton of points and putting himself right back in this championship. Hayden Gillum ends up really strange 4th to me, right there on the back of these guys. Richie Escalante, again, right on the back of these guys. He was a lot closer the second day, went 2.7 seconds quicker the second day did Richie Escalante. Mm-hmm. Then we had Bryce Prince, who, again, another guy we should talk about. Pole position wasn't really a factor in the second day at all, especially after the restart. After we had Hunter Dunham go down, we had a restart, and Bryce never really factored into the race. On a weekend we felt that he could possibly win. The first day he crashes out of second place with two corners to go. Nick McFadden 7th on the second day. Lucas Silva, who just continues to rack up top 10s. Great to see Danny Eslick back, finishing 9th on a Cowie, on the Suzuki rather, right behind Lucas Silva, his teammate for the weekend. And Aguilar ends up 10th. So when you really take the time to look at how the weekend went, there's so many different stories. But PJ Jacobson, since Laguna Seca, I think has racked up more points than anybody. He ended up 2nd at Laguna, if you remember, to Bobby Fong. Goes to Sonoma, wins the second day there, has 2 podiums at Pittsburgh. And what's he back, Greg? 20 points now?
Yeah, 20 points. And you're absolutely
Nothing.
right. So if you look at that since Monterey, so that was our 9th race. And so including Monterey, we've had that there's 5 races. So we've had Monterey was a single, and then the next 2 rounds were both doubles at Sonoma and Pittsburgh. If you look at that, you have a DNF from Hayden Gillum in Sonoma, and then you have a DNF from Bobby Fong, and PJ has finished what? 2nd, 3rd, win, 2nd, 3rd. So yeah, he's definitely collected the most amount of points. He's only 9 points back from Gillum and 20 back from Fong. Yeah. How big would it be, Jason, if PJ Jacobsen ended up coming not out of nowhere, but pretty much out of nowhere to win this championship at Barber?
Well, there's been talks with that team too. They just couldn't figure out what was going on, whether it was a PJ thing, a bike thing, a combination, obviously. And they went testing right after Utah. There was a lot of frustration after Utah. They went and tested before Laguna Seca, found something. And since then, we've seen what's been going on. His point tally has been up. And he is a scary prospect, only 20 points back going into what will be a home race for him, being New York native. He's been to Jersey a bunch of times. I remember going there and watching him test in 2008, I believe. I remember going there and watching him ride. That was really the first time I'd gotten to meet him, and so on. And now 20 points back going into this weekend. And then, of course, a Barber, another track that I think PJ actually knows really well. You got to remember, a few of these places PJ had never been. Sonoma wasn't a track he'd ridden a lot. Pittsburgh, he'd never seen one half of the track. He's been doing a couple little track days here on street bikes. But and again, Greg, when we look back at that second race, he was going backwards before the red flag.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, that red flag comes out. They make a small change, and with the exception of Bobby Fong, he on that race, he beat the guys he needed to beat. So he got a big points haul on Bobby on the first day and beat Hayden Gillum both days. So, and we saw a little bit of animosity between Hayden and PJ. Hayden does a lot of, gesturing when he's on the racetrack. PJ doesn't like it. Also feels that some of the riders in that class, the way the dive bombing and things happens. So, who knows what we could see, because I think Jersey's the kind of track, Greg, where we could see 6 or 7 guys in that lead draft at that front straightaway. Guys are going to be chopping each other up, and yeah, there's so much time left in this championship.
There's a lot. Bryce Prince, you talked about him briefly.
Yeah.
Seems like his coming out party. He wasn't able to close it. Obviously, he wasn't able to, you know what I mean? But it seems like he's there now. He did have the fastest lap of race number 1. And that fast lap of race number 1 was a 1:43.896. And Bryce was the only rider in race 1, part number 2, I guess you could say, that was even into the 43s. And then the next day, no one, Sean Dillon Kelly and Bobby Fong dipped into the 43s with Hayden Gillum. But, the question becomes now, is the characteristics of Jersey suit his riding style? Because it seems to me like Bryce Prince likes more of the up and down Sonoma-ish, which Pittsburgh definitely lends itself more than a relatively flat. I mean, I'm going to call Jersey flat. Yeah, there's a couple elevation spots, but to me, riding that place, it seems pretty flat, It is, but it's a good track for him. It's one that, you carry a lot of corner speed. And, Greg, winning is hard. It just is. It's hard. And when you are as fast as he was at Pittsburgh, and he basically led all the sessions, and he ends up getting pole position, there's a whole different type of pressure when you're sitting on that front row and you're sitting on pole and you feel like you should win. And really the first day, the best thing possible that could have happened for Sean Dillon Kelly is that Bryce Prince passed him with like a lap and a half to go. And Sean Dillon Kelly immediately fired back off as they came across the start-finish line, going into the white flag, going into the last lap. Sean Dillon Kelly was able to go back past him, and really it eliminated Bryce's favorite spot to try to pass, which was turn 12. He was able to make passes up the inside of people, and that's where he had passed Sean Dillon Kelly. So
essentially what it did is it lit a fire up under SDK a little bit going into the final lap. It's hard to win, and both those guys were going for those first wins. And by the time they got through that chicane where Bryce was extremely fast, Sean Dillon Kelly protected the inside. Bryce was trying to run a little bit more corner speed to try to cut back up underneath in the middle of the corner and just simply tuck the front. And you can go literally in a weekend from being the fastest guy in every session to looking unbeatable, putting it on pole. But when that light goes out for the races, it's a whole nother type of element. And, Bryce is another guy that once he wins, he could probably win a few of these. It's just putting all the pieces to the puzzle together on the right time.
I mean, look how it took not long, but look how it took some time for Garrett Gerloff to get into a winning rhythm. He had been fast, and then there was just putting that race together. And this is a guy who just, a year before in Supersport was winning races like it was nothing. I mean, he was just dominating in his last bit in Supersport, but it did take him some time to figure out how to put a race together and win in the Superbike class. And now we have a Garrett Gerloff who is definitely deadly. I mean, Garrett's so fast in Superbike, he could win out. We don't have that in Supersport. Like, I don't see anyone in Supersport right now, that is going to run away with it. Sean Dillon Kelly can win. Bobby Fong can win. Obviously, PJ, Hayden Gillum. Bryce Prince could all of a sudden have his coming out party. Richie Escalante could get some things, sorted out. And now you're looking at legitimately 6 people that could win races in this class.
Yep. But it's just getting it done. And it's really hard to be a first-time winner. And you see what it did to Sean Dillon Kelly. He went to bed Saturday night, going to bed, completely different mindset of, you tell yourself that you can win these races. You do that even if you haven't won. You go, I can win, I can win, I can win. Then you do it. And you go to bed on that Saturday night and you can hardly wait till the race comes on Sunday morning. I mean, literally can hardly wait. And, when you see what he did on Sunday, he rode with such poise, such confidence. There's no question he knew what was at stake between his teammate winning, leading the championship, but he's still in the fight himself. So he took it to those guys, and that's what he did. And, I don't know if he would have had the same result the second day had he not won the first.
Gotcha. Yeah, I totally get
that.
Yeah.
So amazing stuff. And you're right.
Listen,
I don't. Yeah.
This isn't 2006, 2007. I'm not saying that what I'm about to say happened back then, but there were rumors that things happened about team orders and those types of things. Meaning this, Jay, when the money was flowing like wine back in the day, the team could walk up to their second rider, in this case SDK, and say, listen, if you're in a position to win the race and you roll out of it and you let Bobby Fong win, we'll still pay you the bonus like you won the race.
Yep.
Right? Because that type of stuff, it used to happen. And then as a rider, basically you go, okay, well, financially I'm still in a good place because they know I could win the race, but obviously in the record books, blah, blah, blah. We don't have that kind of funding anymore or whatever. So at the end of the day, this still is an individual's sport. It's still Sean Dillon Kelly's name in the record book. It's Sean Dillon Kelly racing for his future as much as it is Bobby Fong and everyone else. So if people think that there's team orders, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out at the last round, because I find it really difficult to believe that we're going to leave, New Jersey Motorsports Park with a Supersport championship, winner. We definitely can see some in some other classes, Jason, like the next, class that we're going to talk about, which I'll get to unless you want to wrap up anything on Supersport.
No, I think we've killed that one. I think you're 100% right. And I think, with 45 points separating the top 4 right now, the whole idea of teams coming to their riders and saying, hey, listen, whatever, we'll give you the same bonuses if you can help out. We had more riders, basically there was more riders on certain teams that could had the capabilities of doing some of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's really hard to do it. You can't really do it when you're talking to a guy in a team that still has a chance to win the championship.
Yeah, right.
You can't do it. Yeah. So like Sean Dillon Kelly right now, he still is very much in this championship. What is there, Greg? There's 200 points still at stake, or no, I'm sorry. There'd be 100 points still at stake, and he's 45 back. Anything can happen still. So, the ideal situation for you and I calling these races is that we go into Barber with 4 guys still having the chance to win the championship.
All tied. That would be the best.
That'd be fun. Yeah,
Everybody
really
tied up.
That'd
but
be great.
Moving on to the Liqui Moly Junior Cup category, that's not happening at all, because there's a young man named Rocco Landers who is absolutely dominating this class. And with 4 races left, 100 points, he's 75 points ahead of Dallas Daniels, who's not even going to be at the races anymore, as far as I know. And then he's 77 adrift from Kevin Almeida. Now, Kevin did win, at New Jersey Motorsports Park last year. He won a race, but, with the way Rocco's riding right now, and it was Kevin who got his first win in race number 1 of 2019 in the Liqui Moly Junior Cup class. And then it was Dominic Doyle, Dallas Daniels, and then Jacob Stroud and Gage Reese. Jackson Blackman is in 6th spot, and we'll talk about him in a minute. And then that's because Rocco had a problem. Looks like, I think his clutch or something went out. So they got everything sorted out for race number 2. Rocco wins by 8.1 seconds over Kevin Almeida. Jackson Blackman, I think a very happy surprise in 3rd for us. Damian Jigaloff, Hunter Dunham doing double duty. That was before his big crash. Dallas Daniels in 6th. Of course, Dallas showing up after getting released from, the quarterly racing on track development team in Sonoma. He ends up coming back on a Yamaha and puts the thing on the podium his first time. And that was kind of like, oh, wow, this is absolutely amazing. But when things settled down into race 2, it wasn't quite that way.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Talking points for Junior Cup for you.
It's hard because Rocco's just so dominant. He's so good. It's fun to watch. I like watching him ride. He's been the class act of the field this year. And I think that now we're looking at some other guys that could possibly be stepping up. I really, really like this Kevin Almeida kid. I think he's really good. And I think the fact that he even, I don't want to say he played down his win on the first day, but it really seems like he's got his head in the right place and he's a very realistic young man. And I love the fact that he got into a battle on that first day with Dominic Doyle. And it was almost like it looked like he was saying, hey, I'm the one who's going to win this race now because Rocco's out, I'm winning it. And he did a fantastic job. We saw Dominic Doyle. Dominic had been on the podium, funny enough, and in Atlanta, he ends up 4th. But after a technical infraction, Almeida got booted off that one. And so Dominic never really got to be on the podium. He does a switch on teams himself. He goes from his mom and him driving around the country with his stepdad or whatever, most of the time driving maybe by himself. He goes from that to getting on the BartCon Racing Ninja 400 that was occupied by Damian Jigaloff most of the year. He goes and puts that thing in 2nd. So that was nice. And like you said, Dallas Daniels finishes 3rd. Jacob Stroud is another guy that we saw get close to the podium in that last lap battle. So I know Andrew. Did you know Andrew Stroud?
A little bit, yeah. When he was racing for Arian, we used to race in the same class.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I used to talk to him a little bit. Nice guy, real nice guy.
Yeah, Andrew's great guy, and I think Andrew has 9 kids, and so it's good to see one of them over here racing with us now. Is Jacob Stroud? He's on that.
I beg your pardon. What did you just say?
He's got 9 or 10 kids or 8. It's somewhere. I know he's got a basketball team and some reserves on the bench if he needs them. So,
wow,
yeah,
that's a baseball team. Come on now,
it is. Yeah.
That's
hard. Great guy, awesome guy.
Cool.
Fierce competitor, New
yeah.
Zealand Superbike champ a bunch, won races here in America. So anyways, good to see him. I think that going into these final rounds, just seeing who's going to continue to step up. It looked like Dominic had some pretty good pace. He ended up the 2nd day running off the track after losing the front. But he kind of had the pace to maybe run with Landers and Kevin Almeida, which is good. When you look at the 2nd day, Jackson Blackman, Jigaloff, Hunter Dunham, like you said, prior to his incident in the 600 race, they're all there, but they were 17 seconds back, 18 seconds back of the front runners, as was Dallas Daniels, 19 seconds. So it's really going to be who can go, consistently. Almeida's shown that he can go with Rocco at certain places, battled him all the way to the line at Sonoma. But even in the 2nd race at Pittsburgh, Rocco made it pretty boring.
Jason, what is the most impressive thing about Rocco Landers on the racetrack? like what he does?
It looks like he rides with no pressure. He gets a ton of time on racetracks. So I think that the fact that he's got the experience, he's got the racecraft, he's unflappable. You never see the kid, not one time all year, look anxious, frantic, worried, none of that stuff. And we saw him a little bit bitter after his loss, didn't really know how to take it at Utah. He comes back to Laguna fresh and smokes everybody. Sonoma, he got into a battle the second day. Didn't really run away from those guys the first day. Track he hadn't seen. Lost a lot of time on that 2-day schedule in the first practice session Saturday morning. Figured the race out as he went. Won, and then the second day Almeida battled him. Here again at Pittsburgh, it really wasn't close.
Let me ask you the question in a different way. Okay.
Yeah.
If you're the rest of the field, what is it that the number one thing you can learn from Rocco Landers?
I think that study him, watch his movements. Look how little he does on a bike. He doesn't do much. He doesn't do anything spectacular. He doesn't do anything that you sit there and you watch him and you go like, oh my gosh, he's got the bike doing this, or he's got everything he does looks simple. He reminds me of Cameron Beaubier a lot. Everything that you watch Cameron do when Cameron's out front of a race or pushing, it's amazing. The last 2 laps of the Superbike race, going back to that real quick, at the second day after Cameron rode off the racetrack in the chicane, those last 2 laps, our screens were just going purple and purple, which means it's the fastest sector lap times of the race with 2 to go. But it didn't look any different than what he had been doing. That's what Rocco does well. And you watch a lot of these young men and ladies in the Liqui Moly. I think it's important to, and I've said this before, the effect of what social media is and how we get perceived. Rocco wants to be great, and he is great. And I don't think Rocco cares so much about getting that killer picture and killer, elbows on the ground. And as long as he's winning, that's what he cares about. And he's very grounded with his riding. I think he's very grounded in the way that, hey, this is how I do it. This is how I'm going to continue to do it. And he wins.
For me, Jason, I think the most impressive thing for Rocco, and if I was racing around him that I would want to do, is just watch what he does on the first lap. He gets so much time on the first lap that nobody else seems to get. I mean, if you go back and just look at like fast lap to fast lap, which is obviously, it sounds like I'm hung up on that, but it's a good indicator. This is something I learned from you, actually. I hate to give you credit for anything, but it's something I learned from you years ago. It's like, if you can do that time, then you should be able to do that time all the time. Now I get, obviously tires,
qualifying tires. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Aside, right?
Yeah. But if you look at it, Rocco, his fastest time in race number 2 was a 1:53.9. Kevin Olmedo's fastest time was a 1:54.0. So if you say, okay, great, do those times, if that was the case and Rocco could maintain that pace and Kevin could maintain that pace, you're talking about a 10-lap race. Now you're only talking about theoretically a 1 second difference, not 8.1 seconds. I think that Rocco goes out so fast on the opening lap that he just kind of snaps the back of the rest of his competition and basically goes, all right, you guys just go ahead and race for it back there. I'm going to just do what I do up here. And I think that if I'm them, that's what I'm looking at. How can I, if I'm Kevin Olmedo, Jackson Blackman, Damien Gerloff, name it, how can I be better on lap number 1 to not let Rocco Landers go from pole position, get a good start, lead us into turn 1, and then already have, an entire turn by the time we get to the end of the first lap,
And what's crazy is, and I've been a competitor, obviously, when you get around guys that are going to ride mistake-free, like you look at like a Johnny Ray, you look at, Matt Milan, you look at some of these guys, even Mark Marquez, if Mark Marquez gets out to a 2-second lead and you're the guy in second and third and you're seeing it, you're thinking to yourself, it's to ride over that limit to try to catch him. It's discouraging. And when you try and then you make that first little 2/10 mistake and you go like, oh, there's another 2/10 I just gave him and another 2/10 I gave him. And I think that the thing about Rocco that you say, though, that is I couldn't agree with you more, is that he runs that first lap so fast, and he'll have a 5 or 6 second lead, and he still keeps going faster. But he's not trying any harder. That's just his pace. His pace is, his pace can be anywhere from 0.3 to 0.75 of a second or more a lap faster, and he's not maybe having to push to his entirety. And
there's danger in telling him to slow down. You got to let the rider run his pace, because he doesn't look frantic. If you had a guy who was checking out and he looked kind of bothered, and you might get the pit sign that comes out that says, "Hey man, slow down" or whatever. But I just think if you're like looking at Marc Marquez, you look at Rocco Landers, the way he rides, you just got to let him go for it. And at this point now, Rocco has. If Rocco fell down in the next 3 races in DNFs, and Kevin Olmedo won all 3, Rocco would still have a 2-point lead heading into the last race at Barber. That's how big of a lead it is, putting it in perspective. So
yeah, it's amazing. The guy's incredible. And I think that's a great segue right into our next championship, because this other guy is doing the exact same thing, Greg, in the 1,000 Superstock class. When you talk about what Rocco does at the start, Andrew Lee is doing the exact same thing. He's our defending champion in Stock 1000. He didn't have it all his own way at Pittsburgh. The race pace at the front, I think amongst all of the guys, if you speak to them, they will say that the track was a little bit slower the second day. And we did see that in Superbike and some of our other classes, with the exception of Rocco on the Liqui Moly Cup. He obviously went quick. But when you look at what Andrew Lee does, it's very important for Andrew to start the weekends off fast, which he does. He continues then to just kind of pour it on and works very well with his team, with his Franklin Armory Graves Kawasaki team. But we had a new challenger this weekend. Ashton Yates just chipped away at that lead. And going into the final lap, all of a sudden Ashton was there. He made a pass with 4 corners to go, and Andrew fired right back off on him going into the chicane. Again, Andrew wins. But, when you look at Ashton Yates, it was really cool to see him end up second. Corey Alexander ends up third. Miles Thornton, who you and I had the opportunity to speak to a lot and get a lot of questions answered that we had been wondering about this year.
Yeah.
He ends up fourth. Travis Wyman, fifth. Travis was better than fifth. I watched him fall Sunday morning. That team did a great job of getting that bike back together. He crashed, Greg, going up over that wheelie hill. But Andrew Lee is really the class of this field this year, and Ashton brought it to him, though, at Pittsburgh.
Yeah, but the story, I think, championship-wise, was that you have Stefano Mesa, Michael Gilbert, and Jeff May, regular contenders all year long. They're out of it. And I just have to say something. If you didn't see the Michael Gilbert, Stefano Mesa crash, just go search through MotoAmerica's Instagram, because I don't think I've ever seen it before. So I'm going to try to describe it the best I can. Right-hand corner, Stefano Mesa's leading Michael Gilbert. They're on the brakes, so obviously they're decelerating. Gilbert loses the front. His bike slides by Mesa's bike, but got to keep in mind, Mesa is slowing down. So by the time the bike clears Mesa, Gilbert did not. And Michael Gilbert, his face hit Stefano Mesa's rear tire and crashed Mesa out. I have never seen anyone being taken out by a face before. That was the first one. And thank goodness, good quality helmet Michael's wearing, good quality safety gear. Both riders were okay. But man, it was scary, because it wasn't like his helmet, like the crown of his helmet. It was like his chin.
Yeah.
Was that the craziest thing that you saw all weekend, or what?
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to get to this before we stop talking about 1,000 Superstock. You talk about this incident between Michael and Stefano Mesa. I have to, without question, I got to give Stefano Mesa such huge props, because he has been committed to doing this championship this year, and we were worried that he might miss a few rounds. And if you looked at the championship coming into this, he had been so consistent. He'd won race. He won a race at Road America, a consistent podium finisher. This is a guy that's been racing motorcycles for a long time. Love seeing him and his mom and his mom and dad in the paddock with him at every race. Anyways, he made a big commitment to make every round. He got cleaned out, and it was through no fault. Like, Michael is not a dirty rider. He's a guy that I've never actually seen him ever really make a mistake like that ever since I've known him. it would have been really easy for Stefano Mesa, and you could tell that there was some frustration the second it happened. Within a minute, he's over fist pumping Michael Gilbert. And after the race, I ran into both of them as they got brought back because they were kind of in a part of the track, Greg, where you couldn't get back to during the race. And Stefano Mesa was comforting Michael more than he was angry because he knew that Michael had rung his bell a little bit. And Stefano Mesa's level of class to me was already pretty high. It just jumped up so many more notches on my belt because I felt like how he handled the situation and essentially took himself out of the championship. What is it, 48 points now for Andrew, I believe? I think it's 40. I think I have it. Yeah, 48.
Yeah, 48.
Over Mesa, who has his first DNF of the year. I just thought that Stefano Mesa, pure class act, ends up getting crashed out. He'll come back though. I think these last two rounds for him are tracks that he races all the time. Being in Jersey, I know he's raced up there quite a bit, and Barber, he'll be tough. But it was an unfortunate thing, and as well as Jeff May. Seeing Jeff crash was a bummer as well. But yeah, the championship was really flung on its neck. The reason for the crash, Greg, I feel, is because of the pressure that Andrew Lee's applying. He's basically shown that once he gets out front, he's that hard guy to catch. And Michael maybe got a little impatient, saw that little bit of checkout starting to happen, and pushed in a corner, lost the front, like you said. And it was a situation that could have been much worse. But I'm glad those guys were both okay.
Yep. Corey Alexander impressed too. His lap time was right in the mix, considering that they missed the first session. There was like some sensor on the front wheel or whatever. He loses the entire session. And of course, Stock 1000, that was their only race of the weekend. And so they have abbreviated time, even on a 3-day weekend. And it was a bummer to see Corey lose that time, but he got up to speed quickly and just ended up fading at the end, 4.8 seconds behind. But fun to watch Andrew Lee doing what he's doing. And, we've had him on the podcast, obviously. He's
been motivated by Greg.
Oh, yeah.
He's been motivated by you this year.
A little bit. Yeah, he might come up with a bit of a surprise on the back of his leathers for the final race of the weekend. We'll have to see. But, he's trying to prove to me he has explosive speed, whatever that term I made up. But the thing is that he's on the lips of other people in the paddock because of what he's doing. He's consistently out front and setting the pace, but he's also, just completely fighting off any advancements anyone has without making big mistakes. And if you just look at the beginning of the year, I mean, really the only, hiccup has to be Virginia, which was one race. And that was, obviously he was hurt.
Not even a hiccup. It wasn't even a hiccup though, really. It was prior to Virginia where he got hurt. So in a way he ends up fourth there, which gathered him a bunch of points. And what's even crazier, and I don't know if you follow there's so many of these guys on social media now, but even, he's got Derek Keys with him, who's been with him for a long time now. They raced AFM this last weekend, Greg, and he essentially went half a second to 3/4 of a second of a lap quicker every lap compared to his MotoAmerica pace.
Wow.
And he beat Valentine DeBees up at Sonoma this last weekend, who was also riding another Graves Kawasaki. And they found even more even this past weekend up at Sonoma. So, but the thing is what I find incredible about it is not just the speed, not just the consistency, not just the fastest laps and all the other things that go with it. And please, I don't want to curse anything. I don't really believe in that stuff, but he never falls.
Yeah.
He just doesn't. He does all this stuff well with what he does. And if you're a team owner out there, he's young, he's aggressive, doesn't fall, goes fast, wins races, 100% committed. He would be on the top of a list of anywhere I would think of giving somebody a shot.
Yeah. All he lacks is explosive speed. Oh, Andrew, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Calm down. I am just kidding. All right. With that, Jason, everybody watch Stock 1000. If you're wondering where it is, MotoAmerica Live Plus app. Just go get it. There's video on demand of all the races for the year. Just go pay for it. Get the app. Trust me, you're going to enjoy it. Let's move on to Twins Cup. There were 2 events for Twins Cup, and both of those races were won, dare I say, dominated by Alex Dumas. How old is he now? Is he 17 yet, or is he still 16?
Yeah, I think he's sick. He's just 17 now, 17, I believe.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Dumas on the road racing World Young Guns Suzuki This is a class where I love watching because you have Suzuki, Yamaha, Ducati on the podium. Race number 1, it was Dumas, Drake Beecham, Michael Barnes, Joe Blasius, and Chris Parrish, your top 5. In race number 2, it was Dumas 9.4 over Drake Beecham on a Yamaha. How do you say it, Jay? Yamaha? And
Yamaha.
I don't know.
Well, I don't get it.
What?
Let's talk about this for just a second.
All right.
I just listened to you say it, and it sounds the same to me. But we get in this debate all the time about Tony's last name too,
Right.
Elias, right?
Right.
Did I say that right? Elias?
No, Elias.
Elias.
Elias. And
Whatever.
the only reason I say is because, look, don't worry, I have something spelled out on a card that I'm going to put up in the booth this week. Okay.
That's great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
Appreciate that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because he said it on this podcast when I asked him that question. And he was like, it's Elias. And his sister says Elias too, not Elias.
All right.
Anyway. Yeah. And Michael Barnes
T-E.
again. Yeah, exactly. Chris Parrish, Chris Turner. So obviously, Jason, I think you paid a little bit more attention to Twins Cup than I did, only because I had some things I was doing TV related after the fact. But it looked like at the beginning of the race, it was kind of the same thing, right? So tell me about the races, because it looked like Drake Beecham on the Yamaha got out to a jackrabbit, and then Dumas just kind of worked his way, was biding his time, and then set sail, right?
The first day was an insane race because Beecham led, and there was one, like the second sector was giving Drake a lot of issues. It's that sector from turn 7 all the way through the S's, and he was a little bit, that was where his pace was just a little bit off compared to everywhere else on the racetrack. And so you'd get kind of this Congo line of guys up behind him, and you kind of had Chris Turner and Parrish and Blasius and Barney and Beecham, and you had all these guys kind of running over each other, trying to, they're all fighting behind him, but nobody could really get past Drake. And then once Alex was able to do it, he kind of pulled away. He needed to get down that front straightaway for one lap and get up to turn 3 without being passed. And then Alex kind of had it his own way. The racing behind him was frantic, though. Michael Barnes probably had the save of the year on the quarterly racing Ducati. I don't know how he saved it, but years and years of experience. I went to him on the podium. He was the first guy I went to on the podium, was Barney. And I'm like, that is the save of the year. I can't believe he didn't fall. He ends up, because he's fighting for this championship so hard as well. And so he ends up 3rd. But Alex just he kind of pulled away. And then the second day, again, the lap times, when you look at the lap times, Dumas got by everybody. Barney went with him. They pushed each other. They were out front. They were getting away. And then sort of with 2 laps to go, Michael Barnes was really angry in the podium afterwards because he thought his lead was bigger than it actually was. So Beecham gets him at the line in the second race. So we had the podium finishers the same way 2 days in a row. But Greg, the race for 3rd in this race between, at the time, Beecham, Chris Parrish, Chris Turner, Madama was in there, Darren James was in there. These guys were running into each other. I mean, for probably 5 laps, they were just running into each other every lap. Did you get to see any of that?
I didn't get to see much of the race, Jason. I think I saw Joe Blasius crash his brains out on the warm-up lap or something like that. And that was about all I saw. Was that race 2, right?
That was race 2. Yeah, poor Joe. I hope he's okay. Hopefully he's all right, because that was a big crash. He high-sided out of turn 6 on the warm-up lap, and he's deserved to be up there closer. Like in the first race, Joe had the pace to be on the podium. I think there's a little bit of racecraft there that he's still learning and things, but the second day to see him do that was a shame. But these guys,
it was heartbreaking for sure.
Yeah, it was horrible. But these guys were hammering on each other, like running into each other in almost every corner. And it was because there's a significant, they have advantages and disadvantages, as is racing, where it looks like the SVs get through the turns a little bit tidier than Drake's bike. And Drake's bike's got a little bit of horsepower down the straights. And so, it's just kind of one of those slinky effects. And, it'll be interesting to see how in Jersey it all pans out, because I feel that we've had some Twins Cup races where we've got 8 guys at the front group like we did at Laguna. I think it'll be the same way at Jersey.
Yeah, and if you go back through the field in Twins, it's fun to watch because there are little groups of people that end up racing together. Like in race number 1, there was a battle for 9th place between Reeves, Lilligard, Trees, and Champ. They were all within a second of each other. That's the fun thing about watching, the Twins class. But in terms of the championship, Jay, looking ahead to the next 2 rounds. So what, Twins has 1 race. Who's got 2 races at Barber? Is it Twins or
the 1,000 Superstock?
Okay, so there's 2 races left for Twins Cup, and Beecham is only 9 points behind Dumas. And I believe it was Dumas took the championship lead at the last race we were at, right? So he got 10 points. So going into there, Dumas was 1 point back. Now he's 9 ahead, where Barney's only 19. So for sure, Chris Parrish, your number 1 plate, is out of it because there's only 50 points left, and he's 55 points back. So it all comes down to Dumas, Beecham, and Michael Barnes, which I believe all 3 are rookies in the Twins Cup class, which I'm smiling because I love calling Barney a rookie.
I've said it for years that I just love Michael Barnes. I do. How do you not? I mean, he's been around for so many years. He's so incredibly relevant still. And I know I've said this in the past. He'll probably kill me. Maybe he doesn't listen to us, hopefully. So, but I think he's at least 2 years older than me, maybe 3. I'm 49. So, but he was always so underrated. Like Michael could have the ability to get on any motorcycle around, and they couldn't have put a more perfect guy on that bike to try to run down and win a championship on. Obviously Dale Quarterly, with the Quarterly Racing Development Team, they got that Ducati together and they put him out there on the thing, and he's won races going away. And as everybody's kind of chipped away and got closer, he was really frustrated the second day because he felt like he let the team down a little bit. I think he tried a different tire, but he thought he had a bigger lead than he did. He thought second was going to be his, and he ended up third. And to see him still angry and like pretty fiercely angry about it, it was encouraging for guys like me where, he still has that competitive burning inside of him to want to do well. So, I was just ashamed to see that happen to him, but totally relevant guy. Great guy.
Well, that's going to do it for us on this podcast. Now, Jason, obviously we want everyone to come out to New Jersey this weekend because the weather's going to be perfect, right?
Yep.
But
absolutely.
You can also catch us, Jason, myself, and Hannah Lopa on our 1.5 hour shows, Superbike class, on FS2 or Fox Sports 2. That's on your television or wherever you can find it. All the other races, practices, qualifying, ton of other content is available on the MotoAmerica Live Plus app. Check out NBCSN for Inside MotoAmerica. It's a cool behind-the-scenes show that's hosted by our very own Hannah Lopa. Please share this podcast with all of your racing friends. And, don't forget, Jason Pridmore still has yet to sign an autograph this year. What is wrong with you people? I told you, he walks around with a backpack full of Sharpies. Have you signed an autograph this year?
A ton of Sharpies. I let everybody borrow them. I just give them to everybody else, But
actually, no, you have them in your backpack just in case you twist your ankle or break your ankle again. We can just tape them together and make them a splint.
I'm wanting 2019 to be over worse than G-Dub.
I don't. I
just want it to be over.
This seems to be my year at this point right now. So yeah.
Well, seeing how you're doing, shooting your bow and arrow like Robin Hood that you are, I think it's going to encourage a lot of people to maybe give it a shot,
It's really funny because I was telling some people at the last racers, how much money I earned in contingency. And they were going like, oh man, that's it. I'm going to park the motorcycle and pick a bow up. And I was like, you know how insulting that is? Like you're basically telling me anybody could go out and win a national archery tournament. But I know it was just humorous. I laughed.
No, Greg, I think you're spot on with what you got out of that. You're 100% right. I think that the track record that we had, or you had, or if you want to call whatever it was that you did, is when we see somebody like you excelling in something, it's like, whoa, like maybe we need to go give that a shot, as an athlete.